That's the famous pencil that fell out of her hand?
Well,
Oh, it's still down there.
we actually got two of them down there.
Good, great. Well, you can actually move that thing. It's a little
Well,
heavy.
it's too heavy for me to
Yeah, that's
move.
a little too heavy.
You could move it.
No.
There's actually two of them down
Okay,
there.
we'll try to
We'll get them later.
in the court.
We'll get them later.
Keep dropping the pencils, George.
Right down.
All right, I think we can get started back up. Any issues at all before I send for jurors?
No, Your Honor.
Bring the jury in.
Let's all rise for the jury, please. Get that long testimony in. There's a pad out there. There's a pad left. Yes, sir. And pencil. Yeah. Please be seated.
We'll present. Call the next witness.
Statement called Alex Hall.
Please be seated.
Sir, would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury by telling them your name and spelling it for the court reporter?
My name is Alex Hall, Alexhall.
And Mr. Hall, where do you live? You don't have to give us your address, but generally, where in the state of Georgia do you live?
Atlanta.
And how long have you lived in Atlanta?
Going on 4 years now.
Okay. Are you actually from Atlanta?
Technically, yes.
Okay. Now, where do you work?
Home Depot.
And what's your job there?
Software engineer.
How long have you worked at Home Depot?
Close to 5 years I interned there.
So did your internship start in 2011?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Okay. Did you start your internship with Winston Milling and Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know Justin Ross Harris?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
We were in the same major together in college.
Where did you guys go to school?
University of Atlanta.
Okay. And was he, I guess, how old were you? Did you get straight from high school into college?
Yes.
Okay. Now, was Mr. Harris a little older than you, or did he go right through high school to college as well?
He was older.
Okay. When did you first meet him? Was it in classes and things like that?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And what was your major?
Management information systems.
When you knew the defendant in college, was this something that you knew him from having classes and things like that, or were y'all like buddies who hung out all the time? Or tell me a little bit about the relationship back then.
Primarily from classes.
Okay. Did you know that he was married at the time?
Yes.
When you actually came to Georgia to intern, did you move immediately from the internship? Did you start school, or was there a little? Start at Home Depot, or was there a break in between?
There was a senior year of college between internship and coming to full time.
So basically, you do like a summer internship, and then they give you offers, kind of like they do with attorneys that go to big firms, unlike me. And you can tell by the suits, it's not. But you do your internship, you take another year of school, then you start.
Correct.
Okay. And did Mr. Harris and Mr. Milling do the same thing?
Yep.
When you moved to Atlanta and started work at Home Depot, your relationship with the defendant, did y'all become closer once you moved over here?
Yeah, I can say so, yeah.
And you understand why we're here.
Sure.
Okay. About how long before the death of Cooper Harris, did you guys actually start getting closer?
I mean, we had all interned together, like I said. So when you're moving to Atlanta, I moved out of Atlanta when I was 4 years old, so I didn't really have any.
Right.
A lot of family. I didn't have any friends in the area, so pretty close to when I started work. Yeah.
All right. And what type of, as far as being close, I know you guys would go to lunch all the time, things like that. How often would you hang out with the defendant outside of work? Let's say before you guys started your business together.
Yeah, not very often at all.
Okay. Once you guys started your business, did you guys hang out more often as you got working on that?
To some degree, but not a lot.
Okay. Did you ever hang out with the defendant when he was with his wife and his child?
Yes.
Okay. And about how often and what types of things would you do?
I think it was only a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times, and then it was mainly focused around, hey, let's get dinner and discuss, business propositions, stuff like that.
Every once in a while, would y'all do something like go out for drinks, or like, did you get help from him a few weeks before Cooper's death moving?
Yeah.
And the business that you guys were starting, what was the nature of the business that you guys were starting?
I think it was just a small web development, like just a little consultancy.
And what was your business going to do? Just build websites for people, or?
Essentially, if you didn't have a website, or we didn't think your website was very good, we'd go to you, proposition, say, hey, we can build it for some reasonable cost, and then you could eventually have more business.
How far along had you guys gotten with your business up until the point that this happened?
I didn't do a lot of legal paperwork. It seemed like we were pretty much all the way there with the legal stuff. I think we had one firm client and then maybe a couple of prospective clients, but that was about it.
Now, while you were at Home Depot, when you were working there, did you and the defendant work in the same building or different buildings?
We worked in different buildings by the end of it.
Okay.
He may have been in the same building at some point in time as me, but certainly not by the end of it. There was 2 different buildings.
As far as you can remember, in the months leading up to the incident, then you were in separate buildings.
Yes.
Now, would you ever go do anything? Was it just you and the defendant and the child, or was it usually like the family? Was it like Leanna was involved too, or did you ever see Cooper that often?
No, I personally didn't. Like I said, it was mostly to talk about work and all that.
Now, as far as you could tell, did you notice any problems, him having any family problems, or he didn't discuss any family problems, marital problems, anything like that?
No.
Did everything appear normal on the outside as far as you could tell?
As far as I can tell, I mean, I don't dig into stuff like that, obviously, but.
Yes, sir. Now, when you saw Cooper, as far as you could tell, did he seem like a normal child?
Sure. I mean, I had little interaction with him.
Okay. Going to kind of like the routine you guys had as far as lunch and things like that. Generally, how often would y'all go to lunch?
A couple times a week, maybe 3 or 4.
Do you remember talking to the detective soon after this?
Yes.
Okay. If you had said previously, back closer in time, that it was like every day that you went to lunch, would that have been accurate?
Probably.
Okay. I mean, this was something y'all talked about like every day online, right?
Sure.
What types of places would you guys go to lunch?
Just places pretty close by. I mean, it's kind of hard to get in and out of the building, so we typically don't go somewhere super far away.
And when you get out of the building, there are plenty of places kind of close by to go eat, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what were some of the places you went regularly?
We'd go to Publix. There was a taco place that we used to go to.
TLD?
Yeah, that one. Other than that, like I said, it was all the places right in the neighborhood.
Would you go to Chick-fil-A sometimes?
Sure.
Did you ever go to breakfast with the defendant or anything like that?
No, I don't think so.
Did you guys have was your work environment and structure a little bit different than his?
I mean, yeah.
Okay, explain to the jury why that is, just based on the type of work you did and what your office was doing versus the .com area where he was and kind of how they do a daily basis as far as a job.
Yeah, so typically they're a little more lax. They come in a little later and all that, whereas I came in pretty early. I don't remember exactly. I remember coming in early. I remember, I came in much earlier than he did. Was the gist of it. I don't remember exactly why. There are a couple of possibilities of why I carpooled for a little bit. I don't remember if that was before or after.
As far as when you guys would go to lunch, who drove?
I think we tried to kind of move on and off, but mostly me. I seem to recall once had a truck, so he couldn't really.
So when you say on and off, that would have been between you and the defendant, not Mr. Milling, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So you've ridden in the defendant's car before?
Yep.
Okay. And did y'all have any routine about who would sit in the front while he drove, or who sat in the back, or is it just kind of whoever calls shotgun first?
Yeah, I don't think it was a hard routine.
Okay. And when you obviously every day y'all would go to lunch, no matter whose car it was in, you guys would just talk and banter and things like that.
Sure.
Okay. Did he ever seem to have any problem inside the car communicating with you when he was driving? Seem impaired or anything like that?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. So basically, you guys could talk and everything in the car, and he didn't have any problems, correct?
Yep.
Now, outside of the car, were you aware that he was had an incident with his ear where he could barely hear out of his right ear?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you're outside of the car, you're like in a more open area. Would he try to sit on certain sides of you?
Yeah, I think it was a louder kind of situation. He'd be harder in the ear, but, in kind of close quarters, it wasn't a big deal.
And when you say louder, like background noise, that type of stuff?
Yep.
And I'm not sure if you were aware or not. Were you aware that a month or so before Cooper's death, that the defendant had interviewed with a Chick-fil-A for a different job?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay. And did he talk to you about that?
A little bit.
Okay. Now, was this something, do you guys get, I think recruiters call a lot and things of that nature?
He called me yesterday, yeah.
Okay. Now, did he talk to you about not getting the job, that he didn't get it and he was upset about it?
I believe so, yeah.
Now, were you ever go visit him in his home or go over there for dinner or anything like that?
I think I went there maybe 2 or 3 times. I don't think it was any more than that.
Right. And back then, was there anything out of the ordinary that stuck out to you? Any problems in the home being there?
No, nothing more of.
Now, I guess, is your job kind of stressful?
It can be, yeah.
Depending on projects and things like that?
Yep.
Did Mr. Harris ever seem like stressed out because of some project, or was it more loosey-goosey over there?
I mean, I can't imagine working a job like that and never being stressed out. I'm
Right.
sure it happened at some point in time.
Do you remember anything about the day of the incident, him being stressed out or anything out of the ordinary?
Not out of the ordinary.
Do you remember him, or what are there times where he would actually say that you guys should leave your job and come over there, whereas his job was easier over at .com?
I think it was more fun, right? And that was the general consensus. We were a little more corporate, and they were a little more like startup kind of feel.
Okay, I'm going to turn your attention to the 16th, the 18th of June, 2014. On that day, do you remember you guys had decided to go to a movie?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember exactly whose idea it was for the movie or anything like that?
I really don't.
Okay. Now, we've already gone over some chat logs and things like that, so I'm not going to go over all that in detail. The jury's heard it, but I am going to show you what's been previously marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 331. Just ask you to look at that for a minute. Just flip through it, just take a couple of minutes and look at it. I'm going to ask you if you recognize the nature of those chats and the screen names and things like that, or the email addresses attached to it.
Yeah.
Okay, and who all are involved in that string of chats?
That's me and Ross and looks like Winston and Jason Abdo and should be about it.
Okay. And with that, does that appear to reflect the chats from the 17th and 18th of June 2014?
Sounds about right.
Okay. Do you remember those independently, what you guys were saying, just sitting here today, 2 years later?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Would those records accurately reflect your conversations back and forth then?
Most likely.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So Regarding that movie, at some point the day before the 18th, you guys have decided you're going to a movie that day, the 18th.
Yep.
Okay. Did you decide what time movie you were going to go to?
Well, I really don't know. I mean, I remember it being like right after work or maybe somewhere near there, but I don't know if we actually landed on time or not.
Okay. During the discussion for that, do you remember what movie was selected that y'all were going to go to?
I want to say 22 Jump Street, but I don't actually remember.
Okay. So, just generally, how far is it from where you are to that movie theater? From your
Not very,
office?
like 3 or 4 miles maybe.
Okay. Maybe a 10-minute drive, something like that?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And to go there, you're going on, well, make sure I get the Cumberlands right. You go on Cumberland Parkway and then take a right on Cumberland Boulevard.
Yeah, sounds about right, yeah.
Okay. And does that road go all the way around to the movie theater?
Yeah. You can go a couple of ways, but yeah. I mean, it's kind of like you're here, and there's a couple of ways to get in between.
Right. And is that the fastest straight shot?
I want to say you can go down the hill and then hang a left onto, I'm terrible with road names.
Like one of those side roads?
Yeah.
Like not Acres Mill, but one of those as you're going toward the theater where you can cut across to Cobb Parkway?
Yeah.
Because that area over there on Cumberland Boulevard, that's not a real populated with restaurants and types of area, right?
Right.
More buildings and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And Acres Mill over by the mall, that's more restaurants and things of that nature in the mall, correct?
Right, yeah.
Would that area be more, I don't know if trafficy is a word, but let me say this, would the traffic be heavier over by the mall and restaurants and things of that nature?
Yeah, most likely.
So you guys had decided to go to this movie and things of that nature. You're discussing this on, what is the nature or the name of the type of chat that you use?
It's probably Hangouts, maybe Google Hangout. It's some Google like direct IM kind of thing. I don't know exactly which one we use because there's been like 3 ones since that happened.
Okay. And so what you were using at the time, had you been using that for a while?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Did you guys just talk about random stuff all the time?
I think it was a lot of work stuff, but I think it was kind of just like a general group chat sort of thing.
So could you actually send links to certain sites and things like that?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you remember a chat back in April of the 28th of 2014 where you actually brought up the existence of a Reddit subcategory named Child Free?
Do I remember doing that?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay. I'm going to show you what a mark for identification purposes is States Exhibit 332. Mr. Hall, I'm going to show you what a mark for identification purposes is States Exhibit 332. Just ask you to look at this. Does this look like it's a conversation on April the 28th, 2014, with the same group, you, Winston, Mr. Harris, and so on and so forth?
Yep.
Okay, and your website connected to that isjalexhall at 1989 gmail.com?
Yep.
Okay. And does this fairly and accurately represent a text or group chain between you guys back then?
Yep.
Okay. You're on a Tinder 332 this time.
Admitted.
So on this, Mr. Hall, it says you on that day said, so ours, is that backslash?
Yeah.
Okay, child free exists. And then you said it's the our atheism of not having kids, correct?
Sure. Yeah.
Did you have kids at the time? Okay. And that right there where you said our child free exists, that's not a web link or anything like that, right?
It's making reference to a part of that website.
Right. So you would actually have to go to it independently and not click on this, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And Mr. Harris's response at that point was grossness.
Yep.
Now, do you know, did he ever say or make any statements to you about whether he actually went to that website or did anything or looked on it or clicked on any links?
Nope, I don't recall that.
Do you even recall that conversation?
Not at all.
Okay. Now, with the defendant, as far as knowing him and his schedule and things, do you have any idea about what his schedule was with picking up his son, dropping him off, who usually did it, or anything of that nature?
I really don't. I know he did it some days, but I really didn't know specifics.
On that day, you guys, you went to lunch.
Yep.
Okay, where did y'all decide to go to lunch?
Publix.
Okay, and who drove?
I did.
Where did you guys go pick up the defendant?
Yes.
Okay, and where did you pick him up?
In front of the building.
His building, the
Yes.
tree house?
Yep.
Once you picked him up, where did y'all go to lunch?
Publix.
Now, did you make any other stops while you were out that day?
We went to Home Depot to pick up labels.
Do you remember going by the UPS store earlier as well to check y'all's mailbox?
Yeah, we did that as well.
Okay. And Home Depot, you were driving, and whose idea was it who needed to go to Home Depot?
I believe Ross needed to go to get light bulbs. I don't remember exactly why.
Okay. And when you talked to the police back right after this happened, you told them about the trip to Home Depot, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So after you stopped at Home Depot, where did y'all go?
I mean, I don't recall if that was before or after the UPS trip. I think
Okay.
we just dropped him back off at the tree house and then went back to the main office.
Do you remember if it was usual or unusual for you to drop him at his car instead of at the building?
I think it was unusual, but at the same time, like, we don't normally go stop at Home Depot.
Right.
So why would?
That makes sense. So that was out of the ordinary too, to stop off and go to Home Depot during your break.
Sure. I mean, yeah. If someone needed to make a stop at lunch, like, it's not an unreasonable request. It was just
Right.
we typically would have lunch.
And do you remember anything about lunch about the defendant voicing concerns that he had a project due and he needed to hurry to get back or anything like that?
I really don't.
Okay. All right. So when you get back, where did you drop him off?
I mean, it's kind of like it's a small parking lot.
Yes.
In front of the building. I believe we just dropped him off right near his car.
Okay. And what kind of car were you driving at the time?
I believe it was the 01 Avalon that my mom owned. It wasn't I think it was my mom's car.
Okay. And I'm not a car person. Is Avalon, is that like a sedan or a?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so, do you remember that day? How long you stopped when you pulled up to his car?
I don't think we'd stopped that long.
Okay.
I mean, for whatever he needed to stop by his car, we didn't need to sit there and watch him do it, right? So,
Right. Okay. So when he got out of the car, what did you do?
I mean, we drove away.
So right after he got out of the car, you drove away. So you weren't there when he went to his car to do whatever he was going to do.
No.
Later that afternoon, y'all were in conversation about going to the movies and things like that.
I believe so, yeah.
Do you remember who was going to buy tickets? Do you remember if you were going to buy Ross's ticket for any reason?
Maybe.
Okay.
I vaguely recall something along the lines of, I'm going to be late, go and get my ticket or something like that.
So your memory is you thought he was going to be running late.
I think so.
Okay. And again, whatever you told the police back 2 years ago would have been more accurate than sitting here today.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. As far as getting a ticket, if you were going to get his ticket, he wouldn't be able to get in until you brought it to him, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Now, when you got to the theater, do you remember, did the defendant ever show up?
He did not.
Did you guys try to contact him afterward?
I think we texted him and called him a few times.
Did you ever have any success contacting him?
No. I remember going right to voicemail.
During the time that you knew him, knew what you thought of his family, or the limited time around his family and things like that, did he ever mention to you other women or having affairs or messaging with women on the internet?
Nope.
Did he ever say anything about prostitution or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay. That's all I have.
I'll let you know, okay? We talked a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Why don't you stick that over there? I want you to come down and help me with something. Yeah. You mind stepping down just for a minute?
Sure.
That's number 5. All right. Alex, would you mind standing over there where the folks can see? I know that's a distance away. Can y'all still see okay? All right. Alex, you testified about going to lunch on a pretty regular basis with Ross and Winston, and when Jason Abdo was working there, he would go as well, right?
Correct.
And you said you think you went a couple, 3 or 4 times a week.
Yep.
And at some point in time, you may have said you went every day.
Yep.
Whether you went every day, 3 or 4 times a week.
Sure.
You went to lunch a lot, didn't you?
Not regularly, yeah.
Okay. And you named 2 places, you named 3 places y'all went. Taco Bellows,
Mm-hmm.
Chick-fil-A,
Yep.
and Publix.
Yep.
Pub Sub, right? Okay. Now what we're looking at here, do you recognize this this intersection where we are?
It's tough to say. I'm not great at stuff like this.
If I were to orient you a little bit,
Yeah, maybe that might help.
okay? If I were to let you know, perhaps this is Paces Ferry and this is Cumberland Parkway, Chick-fil-A,
Ah,
and
Starbucks.
Starbucks.
Yep.
Right. Right. So you know
I'm with you.
this intersection.
Yep.
Right. Chick-fil-A, right here.
Mm-hmm.
If y'all went to lunch at Chick-fil-A,
Yep.
if you were going to go back to the office,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you take a right out of the Chick-fil-A. Can you see? Okay. You take a right out of the Chick-fil-A, and then you'd immediately get in this U-turn lane.
Yep.
And then you U-turn and head right back up
Yep.
Cumberland Parkway,
Mhm.
and you go straight through that intersection.
Yep. That's like right here.
Right. And the treehouse building is actually up this way.
Yep.
Okay. So certainly on the days that you drove, that's exactly how y'all would go, right?
Yep.
Okay. The Publix is down
Yep.
here.
Right there. Yeah.
All right. And when y'all would eat at Publix, you basically have to go the same route,
Mhm.
correct?
Yep.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. And you go, his building is up here, so you go straight through that intersection,
Yep.
straight back to his office.
Yep.
Okay? All right. Thank you. You want to have a seat?
Sure.
All right. Do you remember the police asking you if you've been over to Ross's place, Vista Building, and you indicated that you had been over there a few times?
Correct.
And you said you'd been over there and had dinner with Cooper and Leanna as well?
Yep.
And they asked how he was with Cooper, and you said he couldn't have been more glowing about him.
Yeah. I mean, he liked to brag about it, yeah.
Okay. You never heard Ross say an ugly thing about his son, did you?
I don't believe so, no.
In fact, you told officers that that's what makes this so sad, is that he was so glowing about Cooper.
Yeah.
Did you know that Ross would sometimes go to Little Aprons at lunch and visit Cooper?
I didn't know that, but it's not surprising.
Okay. went at lunch, that would be at a time when y'all did not go to lunch together.
Right, yeah.
Okay. All right. When you spoke to the police, you talked about, or rather, they asked you about if there was anything out of the ordinary about that day, about the 18th. Do you remember that?
I remember them asking me that, yeah.
Okay. And do you remember telling the officers that you had looked back at the G-chats and y'all had really scrutinized what you had done that day, or on the 18th? And that there was nothing out of the ordinary?
Yeah, I mean, it's just typical, whatever, whatever comes up kind of thing.
Yeah. The chats y'all had were
Yeah.
normal?
Yeah, as far as I can recall, I mean, like I said, that was right as it happened, so
Huh. The lunch y'all had was normal?
it was lunch.
Okay. There was nothing at all that stuck out about the 18th that made y'all think anything was weird or different or unusual about Ross?
There really wasn't.
Yeah. All right, the 2 weeks before that, y'all would have gone to lunch during those 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You would have done the G-chat,
Yeah.
whatever it's called,
Sure.
all day.
Yep. Probably, yeah.
You didn't notice anything during that 2-week period that he was coming to a breaking point or a boiling point, or that he was about to have some sort of collapse?
No. Mm-mm.
There wasn't anything unusual, was there?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. If there had been, if the police would have asked you, hey, was there anything in the 2 weeks leading up to Cooper's death? Was Ross different in any way? You could have told them that back 2.5 years ago, couldn't you?
I mean, I worked with both sides. I gladly interviewed with you guys and the other guys, so.
But there wasn't anything like that to tell them.
No.
Us or the police, was there?
I mean, that's the thing is there's nothing that like we said, here's the box, go for it. Come on.
Nothing out of the ordinary. And it wasn't unusual occasionally to run errands at lunch.
No, I mean, Home Depot's right there.
Yeah. Do you recall that actually the day before, on June the 17th, that you actually went to Best Buy?
I don't recall that, but it's like once again, it's like right there.
Sure. And
So-
if it were in the G-chat that you had to run an errand on the 17th to Best Buy, you wouldn't dispute that?
No.
Okay. You drove to lunch a lot.
Yeah.
The two of you worked in one building, and y'all would go pick up Ross,
Mm-hmm.
and y'all would go to lunch.
Yep.
Sometimes he would drive as well.
Yep.
Right. There was no schedule.
Not really.
And so on this particular day, there wasn't anything unusual about y'all going to lunch together. There wasn't anything unusual about you and Winston driving over to pick him up. There wasn't anything unusual about y'all going to Publix or stopping at the mailbox to check and see if there was anything for your business.
Yeah, we've done all of that several times before.
Or to run an errand.
Once again, did all of that.
Nothing remarkable.
No.
All of you guys love movies.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's nothing remarkable or unusual about the fact that Ross suggested, hey, let's go see 22 Jump Street.
Sure. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
There's no reason for y'all to ride together. You drove yourselves over there, right?
Yeah. It's yeah. There's no reason for us to ride together.
And y'all had all planned to leave early because you like to get there early.
Mm-hmm.
So there was nothing unusual about leaving a little bit early.
No.
If the G-chats, well, actually, why don't you do this? If you could, just take a look at and I know I'm not using the right term, G-chat. I'm sure it's not the right thing.
No problem.
But looking for states exhibit, what was the number that we used, the correspondent had the 17th and the 18th.
36.
See if we can find that, yeah. All right. Actually, the states is a little easier to read. call to your attention, let's see. Look through there on the 18th, if you would. Take a look at about 15, 21 hours.
Yep.
And the way this is formatted is it goes from bottom to top.
Right.
So take a look at 15, 21 hours, which would be 11:21 in the morning.
Mhm.
And go up 15:38.
Yep.
Does that appear to be the short conversation that y'all had regarding going to lunch that day?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty standard thing, so not a lot of discussion involved.
Yeah.
Do you want to go, yes or no?
Right. And sometimes one of you would have something to do and couldn't go.
Yep.
And the way it normally started out, one of you throw out there sometime in the morning, where we're going to lunch, and then you start throwing stuff out there. And it wasn't uncommon for y'all to say, sell me, go.
Yep.
And that's what happened that day. You don't see anything unusual about that conversation at all, do you?
No, not really.
And Ross says, y'all, you were aware that he said at 11:25, he said, I might pass on lunch if I want to leave by 4:15 or 4:30. See that?
Yep.
And then look at the next 10 or 12 lines above that. You throw something out, Winston puts the hard sell on him.
That's right.
Yeah. And he's like, okay, come get me and I'm in.
Yeah.
You don't see anything unusual about that at all, do you?
No, I mean, if you're trying to get work done or you got something to do, it might not be really early.
Yeah, and another thing, if, I mean, you don't know what projects he was working on, if anything, do you?
No, not really.
Well, if he wanted to leave early and there was anything that he needed to get done, would he save about 20 minutes if y'all came to get him?
Yeah, because it's actually a lot harder to get into the main office than it is to get into the side office.
Which is why you drove more times than he did.
Right.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to help me one more time, if you don't mind. If you can step down. Actually, you know what? Hang on one second. Let me have a few things marked. Am I on 37? Yeah. Okay. March 31st. Can you see it okay? I know it's tiny. Alex, I'm going to show you what's now been marked as defendant exhibit 37.
Sure.
And ask if you can take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
And can you identify that as the chat, y'all's daily chat between you and Ross and Winston on March the 31st, 2014?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to move 37.
No objection.
Admitted.
Step on down here for me, please. tell you what we're gonna do. I'm gonna move this and let you sort of stand over here with Mr. Rodriguez. You remember Carlos? You just stand over there with him. All right, I want to show you, starting at the bottom, at about, 1957 hours. Okay. You see a discussion there where Ross indicates we are kind of looking in Ackworth, Kennesaw.
Yep.
Right.
Saw that.
You know what he's talking about there, don't you?
Well, context, right? I don't remember the context.
Okay. Well, do you remember that he was looking for a house in that area?
Yeah, it's likely.
All right. Why don't you read up the next 20 lines and confirm that, please?
For a little bit. Yes, the Ackworth, Kennesaw, we're kind of looking at it. It's a decent area. You're gonna, as I said, you're gonna hate your life because I interned there, and it was like an hour plus commute to Home Depot from there. Brutal. So we go, no, it's literally a 1 hour, 1 hour drive every day, better than 400. Available live in Buckhead. Keep going.
Yeah. If you could take
Oh,
one
sorry.
step back, because the court reporter's having a hard time hearing you. If you could just speak up just a tad, Alex, okay?
Sure. So
I want to call your attention specifically, though, to 1647. 1647.
he said, if you pay for my son's private school tuition, I will gladly live in Buckhead.
Okay. So during this conversation regarding, in fact, kind of looking for a house in Ackworth, Kennesaw area,
Yep.
you're talking about the difficulty of driving on 75, and Ross indicates that if you pay for my son's private school tuition, I will gladly live in Buckhead.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so does that put in context for you what y'all are talking about there is he's kind of looking for a house?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. If you would, go all the way up to 2023. You see where he says I live ITP?
Inside the perimeter.
Inside the perimeter. Is that where you live?
That's where I live.
Okay. And he says I live inside the perimeter if the schools were decent.
Yep.
All right. Well, as far as you know, Ross wasn't going back to school, was he?
No.
Okay. But he had a son at that time that was going to be school age very soon. Isn't that true?
It's true.
Okay. All right. Tell you how we'll do this, Alex. Why don't you you hang out just a sec. I'm going to get another one introduced, okay?
Okay.
I'm on 38. Is that right? I'm showing Mr. Bourne what marked now is Defense Exhibit 38. Just a sec.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 38. And ask you if you could take a look at that and orient yourself to it. Does that appear to be a chat between you and the fellas on June the 4th, 2014?
Very likely, yes.
I'm going to move 38 then.
No objection.
Admitted.
All right. I want you to, if you hand that to Mr. Rodriguez, please. All right. I want you to orient and take a look at 15, 27, 28. see Ross indicates to y'all that, or actually the line right below that, Winston, or 2 lines below that, Winston throws out, what is lunch looking like today, men?
Mm-hmm.
Ross indicates he might go home early.
Sure.
See that?
Yep.
And jump on up to 155018. So basically, y'all have a little discussion. Boss, final decision. Finally, lunch with us, yes or no? And Ross says no. See that?
Yep.
And that's June the 4th, right?
Yep.
So you would agree on that particular day there was some discussion that Ross was going to be going home early, and so that would not be a good day for him to go to lunch with y'all.
Sure.
Wasn't going to go that day.
Yep.
I'm showing Mr. Boring what I marked as Defendant's Exhibit 39. Okay, Alex, I'm going to hand you Defendant's Exhibit 39.
Sure.
And ask if you can take a look at that, please, and see if that appears to be the chat between the fellas
Yep.
on June the 6th and part of the 7th, 2014.
Yep.
All right, if you didn't, I'm going to move 39.
No objection.
Admitted.
And I want to call your attention to 22:34 hours. $22:34:30. You see what Ross is referencing there?
Yep.
What is he referencing?
Orange is the new black.
Yeah, he says, word, I'm finishing this episode of Orange is the New Black. Can you tell, do you know what Orange is the New Black is?
It's a show on Netflix.
Okay. Do you know what it's about?
It's about prison, I think.
It's about women in prison, right? Okay. And did you know that, in fact, Ross was followed that show and watched it?
I don't really recall that, but I mean, like we mentioned in the chat, so.
Okay. I'm handing Mr. Boring what's marked as Defendant's Exhibit 40. Okay. All right, so Alex, this is Defendant's 40.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at that, please. Obviously, there's some images on that. That's a 2-page document.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And what I want to know is, does this appear to be part of the chat between the fellas on June the 12th, 2014?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to move forward.
No objection.
Admitted.
Mr. Rodriguez, if you would start on the back page, please. Actually, let's do this first. Yeah, if you can show them the photograph. Now, Alex, we can all see that.
Yep.
I know y'all can't see through him. Do you mind? I tell you what. Do you mind just sort of poking your head and step back so they can see it? The image that's up there, is that the image of a grill and some burgers?
It definitely is.
All right. And then if you look at 20-10-34, Ross let y'all know what he's going to be doing on Saturday.
Hanging out with the lady and my boy on Saturday. So, his wife and son.
I'm hanging with the lady and my boy Saturday.
Yes.
All right, and you agree that this is June the 12th, 2014.
That's what it says on the timestamp.
And this is just days before Cooper died, right?
Yep.
All right, if you'd go on up to the next page, you see there's just a little bit of discussion there. And you're shaming Ross because he's using gas
Oh, yeah.
as opposed to charcoal, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he says, when you have a wife and kids, easy is the way to go.
Yep.
He's probably right about that.
Most likely.
Okay. Okay. I'm handing Mr. Boring Defendant's 41. And we're not necessarily reading everything in here, and I know this, some of the stuff y'all talk about is embarrassing.
Sure.
Okay, because this was all meant to be private, right?
Yep.
Okay. So does that appear to be some of the chat from June the 16th, 2014?
Yep.
Okay, I'll move 41.
No objection.
And then,
You'll hand that to Mr. Rodriguez. And specifically want to look at 1458-17. Can you see it? All right, do you see again at 1458-17 that Ross is again referencing the Netflix program, Orange is the New Black.
Sure. Yep.
And you recall that he watched it, or you just don't recall that he followed it closely?
Yeah. I guess.
Okay. And then let's take a look at I'm going to mark this as 40, we're at 42. All right. I'm handing Mr. Boring what's marked as defendant 42. Take a look at 42. Sure. Orient yourself to that. Does this appear to be y'all's chat on April the 28th, 2014?
Sure.
You identified this, or most of it, a few moments ago when Mr. Bourne was questioning you.
Yep.
Still the same thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Same thing.
We'll move 42.
No objection.
and then,
Right. And Mr. Rodriguez, if you can show him at 14-10-37. It's on page 2. It's at the bottom of page 2. All right, you see there 14-10-37?
Yep.
All right. Winston throws out, what are you thinking for lunch today, Ross? At 10:10 in the morning?
Yep.
All right. Again, this is sort of business as usual. This is kind of how y'all started the mid-morning, trying to figure out where you're going to go for lunch, right?
Sure.
And then let's go all the way up to 15:30:09. After y'all had a little discussion about where you're going to go. 15:30:09. Can you see it, Alex?
Yep.
And again, we see Ross say, in 15 minutes, come and get me.
Yep.
There's nothing unusual about that.
There is not.
Kind of just, that's the way the talk went, right?
Mhm.
I want you to take one more look now over on the front page at the bottom. Let's take a look at, starting at the bottom of the page, at 18:02:06.
Yep.
And do you recognize that being, if we did the calculation, that would actually be 2:02:16 in the afternoon?
Yep.
Does that look right?
Mhm.
And what you say to Ross there, excuse me, what you say in the chat is, so R / child-free exists.
Mhm. Yes.
Do you remember typing that and sending that?
I probably saw it on like the front page, something like that, of the website, and then showed it to him.
All right. When you say you saw it on the front page of the website, what you mean is you saw it on the Reddit homepage.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And you put it out there for the fellows to see
Yep.
at 2:02 in the afternoon.
Yep.
And you give a little explanation. You say it's the R / and that's Reddit.
Mhm.
Atheism of not having kids.
Mhm. Yep.
And, I mean, you don't subscribe to that philosophy, do you, of people never to have children?
No, I was making fun of it in that comment. So I was kind of,
Because it's ridiculous.
the way they go about it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right. Not having kids is a personal decision, but like railing against people who have kids or not.
And, you know what, actually, if you want to go ahead and have a seat, I'll let you sit down. You didn't know you were going to get a workout here, did you? So, you agree that you found this child-free on the face page of Reddit, on the homepage of Reddit,
Yep.
and you put it out there in the chat.
Mhm.
And did you see what Ross's response was?
Yeah, he wasn't for it.
He wasn't for it, was he?
Nope.
In fact, his response was grossness.
Yep.
You've never heard Ross subscribe to Living Child Free, have you?
Nope.
You've never known him to join any group subscribing to a philosophy of living child free, have you?
Nope.
But within 20 seconds of you putting that out there on the chat, he responded, grossness.
Yep.
Okay. And did you catch what time it was?
Me? No.
Let's see what time his response is right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's really small.
Yeah, it's like 3 minutes later, 2 minutes later.
At maybe 2:05:59.
Assuming this is in the current times that are not UTC, yes.
Can you get this one pulled up? Okay. Okay, we're putting up on the screen something that's already been admitted into evidence. State's Exhibit 321, which is a report that we heard from a detective named Yeager. And this is the link, right? This is the site, reddit.com or child free.
Yeah, it's pretty glare, but yeah, I can see it.
All right. You just scoot it down and see what time. David Yeager told us that it was at, you had to subtract 4 hours because it was UTC,
Right, yeah.
but it was 2:02:35.
Yep.
Alex, you would agree that this was, well, let's see. What time did you very first send him the link?
1802, 16.
16 seconds. 18:02, which is 2:02, 16 seconds. So in less than a minute, he checked out the site that you sent him.
Yep. Sure.
And then 2 minutes later, he responded, grossness.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to know is this. Has any police officer or anybody from the state of Georgia ever asked you about this before?
No. I don't believe so. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Who was that?
I don't remember the guy's name, but I think he was the guy that interviewed me on site at Home Depot. I believe so. It's been 2 years since then.
He showed you the G chat from the 28th.
Yeah, I think we gave it to him. I thought. So.
Where you show Ross the link and his response is grossness.
Mm-hmm.
The detective went over that with you.
I believe so. This was a very long time ago.
Has anybody else from the state of Georgia asked you about this since then?
Nope.
You would agree, reviewing these records, it's very clear that you're the one that provided Ross Harris the link to the Reddit subfile child free.
Yep.
And he accessed it seconds later and said grossness.
It looks like it.
Thank you.
Just to make sure we're clear, this right here, that's not a link. We had to type it in and go to that, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And actually, I brought that up to you on direct, correct? The state put that in, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you said at that point you never remembered that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you spoke with detectives, if you would have told them about, are you sure you even told them about that?
Not really, no.
Okay. So if the video or your recording of your statement with the detectives show nothing about that conversation, then it's more, obviously it didn't happen, right?
I would definitely defer to that recording.
Okay, all right. And, I mean, I know this has been a difficult situation since I think you were called by the defense at another hearing to testify before, correct?
Yep.
In July of 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, which it is your right, we've reached out to you to try to speak with you, correct?
Yep.
And you have chosen since that time not to talk with us, right?
Yep.
So even if we wanted to talk to you about it, that couldn't have happened, correct?
Yep.
Okay, just so we're clear about it. Okay, the defense asked you some questions about like I think one of those chats talking about him cooking out with his wife and things like that. Going back to that day that he helped you move, is that just a few weeks before the death of Cooper? Do you remember that?
I think so.
Okay. Do you remember, did he ever talk about getting texts from his wife asking him to come home because she and the boy were going out of town? Did he ever mention that to you?
I mean, I was moving, so I was
Okay.
focused on that.
All right. Were you aware that he had used that date later in the afternoon in your trip as far as helping you move to visit a prostitute instead of going home?
No.
Okay. Would that have been different than the Ross Harris you thought you knew?
Yes.
On the day in June 18th, 2014, did you, I'm sure you weren't snooping or anything, but did you ever look at his phone and try to see what he was doing on his phone throughout that day?
Nope.
Did he ever say anything about the fact that he's been online messaging with women back and forth all throughout the day?
Nope.
And on that day, he said it's easier, it saves you some time when you go pick him up versus him picking you up, correct? All right. It was not saving time to stop off by Home Depot to get light bulbs, I would assume, correct?
No, it wouldn't have.
Okay. And the morning of, I know he talked about his son through some of those chats before. Did he tell you about telling somebody else that morning that he wanted an escape from his son?
I don't think so. I don't recall that.
Okay. And the defense counsel asked you about him mentioning in the weeks before that he was at a low point or something like that, if he ever said that to you.
I believe they asked me about it, yeah.
Okay. They had asked you about it. You said you hadn't heard that from him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with an app, Whisper?
No.
Okay. So you have not seen any messages on his Whisper app about him saying he was at a breaking point at that point?
No.
Now, the messages he was talking about looking for a house, those were back in March, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just one other thing. Looking at, we'll just use Defense Exhibit 5 for time's sake. Okay. Looking at Defense Exhibit 5, that being the Chick-fil-A here.
Yep, I'm with you.
Okay, you go down and you do this little U-turn right here to come back that way, right?
Yep.
And on the days that he drove, y'all went to Chick-fil-A or you're at Publix or something like that, if he's driving at lunch, to take y'all back, he has to get in that left turn lane, right?
Yep.
And if you're coming out of Chick-fil-A, I mean, that's just seconds busting that U-turn to come back that way, right?
Yep.
Sitting right there leaving Chick-fil-A, you got everything right there in eyesight, right?
Yep.
And it's just a quick turn back around.
Yep.
And to make that decision to turn left to go to Little Apron Academy, you got to make that decision to get in that left lane, turn lane immediately. You got to be thinking about it right before you even make a U-turn, correct? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
He's definitely. Coach.
This way? Yeah.
So now we go to the courtroom too, right?